Now, as the negotiations drag on, one Senate moderate, key holdout Kyrsten Sinema, is facing growing hostility from her fellow Democrats, and several of her advisors resigned just a short time ago. CNN's Caitlin Collins is in Baltimore for tonight's town hall. Manu Raju is on Capitol Hill. Let's start there. Manu, tell us more about the backlash Senator Sinema is facing from her party.
Well, it's mostly from liberals who are frustrated about her positions and the way she has handled these talks. Remember, she has not really divulged publicly where she stands on many of these issues, but one issue by issue continues to leak out about where she stands, and their liberals are seeing their dreams of getting this massive plan scaled back dramatically. Not just the $3.5 trillion price tag, they're now talking about $2 trillion, but also some key issues. Tuition-free community college, an issue that I've learned that Kyrsten Sinema raised concerns about, and she's also now making clear she opposes increasing corporate tax rates and individual tax rates, raising a major question about how exactly do they plan to fully finance this program, as the Democrats have been promising for some time. Now, there's now concerns that she potentially could have on the left, facing a possible primary challenge come 2024. One Congressman, Ruben Gallego, told me that he would not rule out the idea of challenging her, said that voters in Arizona are very upset with her. And one Democratic liberal told me on Capitol Hill, Richie Torres, a progressive freshman, said there's a sense in which we no longer live in a democracy. We live under the tyranny of Kyrsten Sinema. Now, he goes on to say, I welcome the ideological diversity of the party. I can live with dissent. My colleagues and I have trouble living with what we perceive to be erraticism. Now, I asked Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, about Kyrsten Sinema's opposition to raising taxes and how they would actually pay for this program, and whether or not Kyrsten Sinema has conveyed those concerns directly to her. This is what she said. Then the tax question. Senator Sinema, from what we understand, has opposed increasing corporate and individual tax rates. Has she conveyed that to you? And to follow up on Jake's question, could this be fully paid for, as you have promised, if her view prevails?
The bill will be fully paid for, and the matter is in the hands of our chairs of the Finance Committee and the Ways and Means Committee.
Has she conveyed that to you, her position to you?
Well, her position is well known.
So she's conveyed that position to the president, who has told Democratic leaders that she will not accept those higher taxes. So now they're scrambling. How do they pay for this? They're looking at other things, such as a possible minimum corporate tax, possible tax on billionaires and the like. But will Sinema agree to that? Will Senator Joe Manchin agree to other divisions within their caucus that they're trying to resolve right now? Major questions ahead. If they can get this done, Democrats want a deal by the end of the week. Uncertain if they can do that.
Caitlin, it sounds like President Biden has a Sinema problem. What is he doing, and what more can he do?
Well, I think it was really telling what Speaker Pelosi said to Manu about this, not committing to still raising corporate taxes, because, of course, that has been one of the chief proponents that the White House has pushed, because they know it's very politically popular to raise taxes on corporations and high earners. And that has been something the president often talks about and was talking about last night when he was in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And so yesterday, the White House had kind of left open the idea that maybe Senator Sinema could be pressured into changing her position on that if every other Democrat was on board. Obviously, it sounds like now they are thinking of alternatives and different tax structures that they can use here to pay for this bill, to make sure it is fully paid for, which they have said repeatedly. And so that's a big question facing the president over how that actually shakes out, because it's obviously critical to getting that framework that the White House really wants to have, by tonight. So when the president is here in Baltimore at the CNN town hall, he can work on selling what that proposal is going to look like, because so far he's had to stay away from specifics in the last few days as they are still hammering out the final details here. And so that's one big thing. It's not new that these negotiations with Senator Sinema are happening. The White House has been speaking to her at length on a daily basis almost, including Senator Manchin, over the last few weeks when it comes to this. And so those will be big questions that are facing the president tonight over what his tactic is going to look like to get all 50 Democrats on board. But just going back to what the president was just saying there, his comments really stood out to me when it came to voting rights, because obviously, of course, that's another big subject facing this this White House and over what they're doing, because there has been a lot of criticism from usual allies of the president and Democrats saying that the White House isn't doing enough here. And you heard the president there talking about steps that the Justice Department is taking. Of course, those are steps that they can take on an executive level, as of course we've seen that the legislation on Capitol Hill on voting rights hasn't gone anywhere, but also just the president talking about the reality of where there was an outcome in the election and maybe some people in certain states did not like it, but instead of kind of taking a step back and thinking and reflecting on the loss, they moved to change the voting rules in certain states, of course referencing Georgia several times there. And the president was saying, he seemed exasperated, saying that there are still Republicans out there who think that he is not the president, that Donald Trump is still the rightful president. And, you know, he did the cross and said, as Catholics say, oh my God, talking about the reality of what they're dealing with when it comes to what Republicans and state legislatures are saying. And I thought that was really notable because, of course, people have urged the president to speak up more when it comes to voting rights.